No.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Zero Interest. Today we're looking at Death Parade. This is going to be a special one because we're going to be doing episodes 8 and 9, Death Rally and Death Counter, because this is a two-parter to this little story right here.
Sure, that's the reason. Yeah. Hmm. It was the intention to get two done and have two recordings so we'd have a spare, but that's not how. You can't really do these ones separately. It turns out,
you,
go figure.
you, you can't. It's very much by sheer coincidence we ended up like having it kind of picked out perfectly for this.
Yep.
So,
It's a two-part self contained story here, which maybe maybe ran a little long, but not overly so. I guess it does kind of fill the time pretty well. Kind of.
mhm.
Mm.
It's a bit slow to start in the first episode
Mm.
of this two-part, but I think it uses its time pretty effectively. I just dropped my mouse on my foot. Ow. Ow. Okay. Take it away, Casey. Well,
So,
I think about pain.
yep, and rattle and hum over there.
Hmm.
I don't know why I use that particular phrasing. That's a thing from something. You too, I think. Anyway,
All I know is that you're English.
so this episode 8, starts with. Please stop making noise. I'm begging you. Um, it's very loud. This episode starts with, you know, Deckham and attendant are in the bar, and Deckham gets a bunch of memories, and he's like, "Oh, shit," and calls Nona and says, "Hey, so we're getting some guests, and one of them's a murderer. I'm not. I haven't done those before." She's like, "Yeah, well, everyone's busy, so suck it up." Basically.
Ha. Hmm.
So we get our two guests. One is a younger dude with a little messenger bag, and one is an older dude. And they get the usual spiel, yada yada. You have to play a game. No, there are no exits. They go and look for exits, and they don't find one. Younger dude finds a knife in his bag with blood on it.
Hmm.
Wonder which one killed people.
You see,
Well,
when I first saw this, I was like, "This has to be like some sort of trick because it's most likely like maybe the other dude is actually the killer,
yep,
and the knife is just a trick to make us think that."
yep. That's what I thought too. Red herring. That's what I was thinking it was.
Hmm.
But yeah, so he hides the knife, and because the other guy shows up, and he's like, "No exits here." And it turns out older dude is a detective, and he's like, "Okay, this is a weird situation. We, hmm, I don't really know how to deal with this, but that one dude, I usually have a good eye for reading people, and I got nothing on that guy." So they agree to play along. They get the whole mannequin thing
Hmm.
reveal shot, and okay, fine, we'll play along with the death game. And they have to play air hockey, which I was like,
Yeah,
yeah, I fucking love air hockey.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a fun game. Um,
it is fun.
so this isn't. The rules are a little complicated, but not in a way that actually really matters.
Hmm.
Um, so the pucks are coloured for each player, and if they score with a puck of their own colour, then it's worth 2 points. But if they get scored on with a puck of their own colour, then it's minus 1 point to them, and the other guy gets
Hmm.
a point. Okay, sure. Um, it's a really unnecessary rule. Even with the context, it's actually kind of unnecessary. Um, so they play. And I'm like, yeah, me and my sister played air hockey, says the younger one. And he's like, we would actually just try and have a really long rally because it was so much fun, but we didn't realize there was a time limit, and she cried when we found out. like kind of a nice, sweet little story.
Yeah.
Um, and the younger dude, their parents died, and he remembers he was taking care of his sister, and he went into work right out of high school,
Hmm.
uh, and looking after her, and she was in high school, and he was so proud of her, and brings a tear to the eye.
Yeah.
Um, and the attendant doesn't want Deckham to use the little nodule thing that makes things bad.
Yeah.
Words are failing me. And he's
The make things worse
yeah, make things
button.
worse button. Yeah. And he's like, oh, well, I can't really do that anyway. It's broken, which I think is supposed to be a lie, and that's supposed to be the context that we gained from the previous episode that it's not actually broken. He just doesn't want to use it.
Hmm.
I guess, which is a lot of episode to waste on that one quote unquote revelation, but sure. Um, so the game goes on for a while, and older dude wants a smoke break and gets one. And he does he remember something at this point?
Um, I'm not sure if it's at this point, but I do know what he does remember at least is he starts remembering stuff about his wife.
Yeah,
Um,
and
yeah.
he forgot his birthday because detective. He's like cliche.
Hmm.
Um, and they basically go over. Yeah, we have to keep playing. It's not so much because I've got a plan. It's more we need to keep going so that we have some way. Maybe something will happen that will let us escape or find something out that's important. And you just have to play along until all the facts come out, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
until we get an opportunity.
Yeah. So they keep playing, and it's all fine. And I believe this is the point where the younger guy remembers what happened to his.
The um, he yeah, the detective remembers that his wife was murdered. Um, and the younger guy remembers that his sister had a stalker and that she was assaulted by that stalker.
Hmm, yeah,
And yeah.
beaten a lot, attacked with a knife, and implied to have been raped, probably. Like, it's a dude attacking a woman after stalking her. That's fair to assume. They don't say it
Hmm.
outright, but yeah. So they both realize that they have reasons to get out of this and that they want to go and get revenge. And they're like, yeah, let's get our revenge and stuff. They have a bonding moment over wanting to kill people that hurt their loved
Yes.
ones, which is interesting. Um, and it turns out the game times out. The time runs out for the game. So Deckham is like, okay, time for sudden death mode. And sudden death mode is basically the pucks that were colored. Uh, they have body parts on them.
As
I,
is typically with these games.
yeah, eyes and hearts. You feel pain if you get your puck scored with on. Uh, if they score against you with your corresponding color, then you will be injured as well,
Hmm.
or something like that. It really,
It's gonna hurt,
yeah.
but
Uh, at some point, they realize, oh, okay, um, I already killed the guy that assaulted my sister, but oh wait, there was another dude. He was just
yeah,
kind of watching.
that's yeah. The attendant goes and is like, "Hey, can I see some of these memories?" And Deckham's like, "Sure." It's like they're both murderers.
Yeah, and it turns out the detective also no, he doesn't realize that he already killed him yet. So
Hmm.
no wait. Yes, he does. He realizes, yeah, I totally killed the person that I wanted to kill. So I guess I should let this kid go and get his revenge because his isn't finished yet.
Hmm.
and so they need to keep playing. And the kid needs to win, is the conclusion that he comes to.
Yeah, I already got my revenge. I got no reason to go out there again.
Yeah. And they keep going, and long story short, they realize that one, the kid killed the detective because after killing the guy that assaulted his sister, the detective shows up at the house, the apartment, whatever, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll kill you too. You're probably the guy."
Because his sister had said there was one other person there, a friend or something, who was watching it all happen.
Yeah, so he assumes, sure, and it turns out he was right because the detective got his revenge on the guy that killed his wife, and then she supposedly thanked him, or at least that's what he heard.
He got a little crazy.
And then he decided, okay, I'm going to just start killing people that deserve it.
I'm going to be the Punisher.
Basically, yeah. And in order to do that, he has to watch criminals to make sure they've committed crimes. And the kid's like, you just stood there and watched while my sister was getting beaten and probably raped? And he's like, yeah, I needed there to be a victim before I could punish the criminal. If I went and saved her, then it would just be another girl later down the line. Because I can't kill them until they've done something wrong.
Because he's kind of crazy.
Yeah, kind of crazy. And so naturally, the kid tries to attack him, and Deckham stops him. And is like, yeah, you can't actually kill someone twice. You're both already dead. You've kind of figured that out at this point. But you can inflict pain. And suggests those pucks with all the body parts on, just puts them in a stack. And you got the knife, you could just right through all of them. And ties up the other guy. At this point, something stupid happens. The attendant decides to intervene and go on a spiel about how this is all a broken Aesop of you're judging them for something that you do too. Like, you're supposed to be an arbiter and he's pretending to be an arbiter of justice and judgment and revenge and all this shit. You're doing exactly the same thing as him by bringing out the worst in people.
You can't. Her main point is you can't just judge people by their darkness alone. Hey, kid, don't go through with this. If you go through with this, you'll be sent to the void, and there will be no, there's no afterlife for you. There's nothing left. If you don't do this, there is a chance you could meet your sister again. Hey, don't do this.
Here's the thing, it wasn't you can't judge people just by their darkness, but more bringing out people's darkness and pushing them to the brink is wrong. Your point actually makes more sense. That's not the point she was making. Her point was basically, if you push someone in the right way, then yeah, they will break, because people are simple and stupid and...
I don't think it's that exact.
That's exactly what she says after. She starts punching Deckham because she's mad at him, obviously, but she keeps screaming that people are simple and will just overreact over the stupidest, simplest, most pointless things. That's a really shitty moral. And also, the whole concept, it's like railing against the concept that you created so you could have something to rail against. The writer is not doing a good job here. But most importantly, the entire concept of the arbiters and the judge, what did they call it? Judgment place?
I don't know what it's called. Again, it's
in the episode, but I don't remember. The entire point of it is everything you've done, okay, that made up who you are this time. So, who are you? Let's find out. And, oh no, they're feeling terrible things. Oh no, they're being pushed to their limits so we can find out who they really are in the dark, which is actually a pretty common concept for this kind of thing. It's really, really common. and she's complaining about it because it's hurting them, when none of this is going to matter, because either way they're not going to remember it after. This is the end point.
For me, I did not fully watch the second episode, so just kind of tried to give myself a refresher. So I'm not sure exactly what she says word for word, but I do remember that what I had interpreted it to be was, what I said earlier, where that you can't just judge people by their darkness alone. And I think that's what the intent of this was, but I think it was a case where it didn't come across properly.
That might be the case. But the other problem I have with this is, once again, why do writers not know how emotionless works? Like, stoicism breaking words don't really work against someone that's not stoic by choice, but stoic by nature. When it's literally not a thing that they do, is experiencing emotions and judging by human understandings. Her showing what human understanding is does not change him from having an entirely different and alien understanding. That's not how that works. But he's apparently completely convinced by her little tirade about how wrong it is to hurt people and such. Like, generally speaking, yeah, but this is also his job and part of the whole system that has been working for however long it's been working. This is just how they do.
And the kid goes through with it and breaks the pucks. And
yep, no matter how much she tries to stop him, no matter how much she tries to appeal to his better angels, it doesn't fucking work. And it turns out, yeah, he is kind of not a great person.
Mm-hmm. And he goes through with it, and it is heavily implied they both just get sent to the void.
Yep.
So these two episodes are what I remember most when I started watching the show again to finish it up. And because, like, as I said, I remember the last one we did, right? And these two, I liked the emotional stakes in them. I liked the character writing for the two characters that this was about. I think that was good. I think that was well done. I think, like, with most of your complaints, it's the complaints about the stuff outside the anthological stories interfering and kind of being too prominent of a role.
Yep. It's like you spent 3-4 episodes actually exploring the concept that you're supposed to be doing, and then immediately going to complete judgment and condemnation of it without having explored it thoroughly enough.
Mm-hmm. And it's a case where this is only like a 12-episode anime, and it's trying to do something in that span of time that probably would be much longer in, say, a manga. But, runtime is limited.
If this was what they were going to do with this, starting with the one that was the most broken and flawed in episode 1 was probably the worst way to do it. It's like, okay, here is my conclusion, and now I'm going to work backwards and try and make it seem okay or something, except he doesn't. So it's like, okay, the system is shitty and broken. Now let me give you the big reveal of how shitty and broken the system is.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not how you... If you're going to try and portray a system as broken, you want to show it working or seeming to work. That's the important part. And then you show where the cracks are. You show where the failures and the little niggling problems are, and then you start to pull away at them and tear until you see that, it doesn't work as well as it should and could be better. Another problem is that she has this tirade, but she doesn't say, okay, this is how you should do it instead.
I think what they could have done with a specific show, because I just found it funny that, like, this is the show that This we were kind of voted for. It's not one that I actually finished on my own, but it is one that gives us a lot of discussion about the genre and about writing in general. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think we could have started with episode 4.
Which one was that?
Because the Death Arcade.
Right. Yes.
I think if the show had started with that on that note, that's one of the better episodes. The system works. And then you go with the ones that work and you gradually work up to the what would be considered the episode 1 to show, okay, judgments can happen that are mistakes. And then you build up to this and you're like, this system is kind of busted. If we were to try to reorganize the show a bit.
Yeah. Like, the timing is off, the pacing is off. This is a... Discussion is probably the best thing that comes from this particular pair of episodes. They did it poorly, and discussion of how they did it poorly is part of it, but also discussion of the scenario and of how it's pushed the system to its breaking point. Like, this is a scenario that Decim himself says, I don't have experience with this. I don't know how to do this one particularly well, but I'll give it a go. And the outside observer seeing the inexperienced dude trying to deal with this situation, there's a lot of wrinkles in this specific example. And that can lead to a lot of interesting discussions of how, okay, Decim probably handled this pretty poorly. What would handling it well consist of, though? Like, I'm not sure there is a good way to handle this specific circumstance. So,
you know what they could have done?
It was kind of shit.
You know what they could have done? First half of the season, you don't start with Decim, you go with Quinn, who was the previous person to do the Quinn Decim bar. Right? So first half of the season, you go Quinn, these are the judgments. We can see that some of them kind of feel a little unfair, but for the most part we can agree with them. And then you shift to Decim, who's the new guy, and you start to see where the more of the cracks are. And then that's what this would lead up to, is how I think you could rebalance it.
Yeah, so instead of starting with the attendant and immediately getting the outside perspective, you start with Quinn and you have Decim, doing his observation, which was, I believe, the previous episode. And you have him viewing that and seeing his reactions and observations of how those go. And he's our outside observer for the time being. And he's not quite human. His perspective is different, but it gives a view of how even these kind of alien people have a view of how their system works and how it's supposed to work.
Yes, and it could give us an opinion of how we could get to know him before we're formally introduced to him and how he views people who live full lives.
Yeah. And then have maybe a couple of judgments where he's just on his own and let those anthological stories just have run of the shop. And then you bring in the attendant to shake things up and change the dynamic of the show and have someone judge the judgments, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the way they've done it is rushed and planned out poorly. And
with an anthology, I find that you have to be very careful because everybody wants to do the thing where the structure for the anthology, we want to talk about what all this stuff over here is. And we want to talk about that structure more than anything else because that structure is something that I made. But really that structure should be as minimal as possible. It's like, do you remember that Pet Shop anime we watched?
Yep. Pet Shop of Horrors, I want to say.
Yeah, Pet Shop of Horrors.
Yeah.
That did it well because most of that entire episode we watched from that was not about the pet shop itself, but about the people who got the pet.
Yeah. They spent very little time actually establishing what the pet shop was. It was just, I can provide things for people. and they sign a contract. If they break that contract, well, that's their dumbass fault then.
Yeah, and
Basically.
it gave very little setup, and that allowed it to retain an air of mystery, so that we would want to learn more about this pet shop in the future.
Hmm.
And I feel like second episode they already take you behind the scenes and start showing you how this all happens and how this all works.
Yep.
And they devote an entire episode to that. Where I feel like episode 9 and 10 would be where you would want to, like, if you're pacing this for 12 episodes, 9 and 10 is where you want to go behind the scenes and start to really explore that, maybe.
Yeah. And that would be a good time to explain, okay, the cracks are showing, and here's where we show, okay, behind the scenes, you have Nona and Quinn, and they're talking about how, okay, there are a lot of fucking people dying. We have to get through a lot of judgments very quickly. How do we try and mitigate this? And that gives you an explanation for how the system is kind of not working as well as one might hope.
Because they're kind of rushing things.
Yeah, and it doesn't have the time and development that they say used to have hundreds of years ago because of massive population explosions.
Mm.
That would have actually been interesting if they had framed it like that, but they kind of didn't.
Yeah. Man, we're just rebuilding the entire show.
A little bit. We tend to do that, unfortunately.
But
Which
I think
it is kind of unfortunate because we're doing it with the benefit of hindsight, which isn't especially fair. But that's generally how critics operate, unfortunately. And
it's why a lot of authors write their books multiple times.
Yeah.
You always got the rough draft, and then you get to the final draft. But for a manga, if this was starting, I can't remember if this was starting as a manga, you can't do that.
I'm pretty sure you've talked about the manga before. So
yeah.
Yeah, if you're writing week to week, you can't just redraft and redraft. That's not how it works. You write it, you draw it, it gets published. That's it. It's out the door. You can't go back and change or fix it now. This is how your story's going.
And you don't want to get axed, so you start talking about the setting, and maybe that's interesting, and maybe that keeps you going for a bit because your manga is gathering some people getting interest in it. Like, when you view it from that kind of week-to-week lens, it has a very different feel to it.
It doesn't really have a different feel, but it has it has a worthwhile explanation for how it ended up this way. It doesn't really excuse the flaws of it. It
doesn't, but
funnily enough, it means that the system is kind of broken. I figure.
This is the judgment against two murderers, and it is an interesting judgment. Like, I like the story of the murderers.
Yeah.
I think that it's well done, and it kind of subverted my expectations, where it turned out that they were both murderers, and one killed the other, and they were that deeply connected. And I don't know, I just really liked the dialogue and the voice acting and just the performances in general by the two people in here.
I assume you still watch the sub?
The sub, yeah.
Yeah, the dub was not as good, I imagine, because the younger dude is voiced by the dude who did Natsu in Fairy Tail, and I didn't like him in that either. He's not that great of a voice actor. And the older dude is a voice I recognize, but wasn't Steve Bloom, was it? He's one of those dudes with the deep voice that just kind of gravelly, an older dude, just a kind of voice. And he did fine, but not amazing. So, oh well.
Yeah. Overall, what were your thoughts? Just, I think we've talked about this a lot, and we talked about the show a lot in general, but, like, closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts are, I think this is the point where I stop actually having any investment in this show, because I saw the preview for the next one, and it looks like it's going to be more of that behind-the-scenes bullshit.
It's going to be a break episode, which is I feel like you don't need break episodes in this show.
It's supposed to be an anthology, so no, you don't. You're not supposed to do. Okay.
So there is a judgment, though. I will say that.
Okay.
But
Does Gyaru Girl eventually leave?
oh yeah, she does eventually leave, and her resolution to her story is actually pretty decent. I kind of like it,
She goes to
but
reincarnation because that's the obvious thing because she
no,
literally didn't do anything wrong.
no, there's something else that happens that caught me by surprise.
Okay.
So, yeah, I guess we'll see you guys next time with Death Parade episode 10, where Casey tries to fight off depression caused by this show.
I assume he means in a meta sense, but let's see.
In a meta sense.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.